we are going to involve the children in the meal prep process, in the grocery shopping process, in the cleanup process. Even if they're not eating the food, we want them interacting with the food. And again, we're not forcing them to eat the food. It's peeling the potatoes, it's cutting the mushrooms, it's stirring the soup, it's squishing the food, getting our hands messy, whatever it is, getting them involved without the pressure of eating it. Even going to the grocery store and having them pick out, okay, which bushel of bananas do you want? They're like, well, I don't like bananas. It's like, that's okay. Which one should we get? And they have that control over it. So there's a lot that's included in the mealtime process that actually doesn't involve eating. That's all really beneficial for our feeding clients. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Jessica. And this is All Things Sensory by Harkla.
We are both certified occupational therapy assistants, and together with Harkla, we are on a mission to empower parents, therapists, and educators to help raise confident and strong children of all abilities.
On this podcast, we chat about all things sensory, diving into special needs, occupational therapy, parenting, self-care, overall health and wellness, and so much more.
We are here to provide raw, honest, and fun strategies, ideas, and information for parents, therapists, and educators, as well as other professionals to implement into daily life.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey there, welcome back to All Things Sensory by Harkla. We're so happy to have you here today. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Jessica. That's why we start YouTube, so I'm confused.
We are your hosts of the podcast. We are hosts of YouTube, but today we are podcast hosts. And we are talking about feeding specifically today. And this is a topic this is more of like a situation that Jessica encountered in the clinic setting, because she is part-time in the clinic working with sensory kiddos and clients and the sensory gym. So Jess, why don't you give us a little background info on this situation?
Yeah. So I work with a couple of really great OTs, and one of them came to me asking for just some tips and tricks with one of her clients. And I ended up coming into the session with them and working with them. And
which I love that, by the way, the mentorship that is appreciated and valued,
Well, and I
the
love
fact
teaching.
that you're a CODA and this is an OT coming to you.
Sure.
Like, let's just talk about that for a second. Like, that's really amazing that there's that collaboration there.
I know.
It should happen more often.
I do appreciate when a therapist comes and asks for advice, because it's like, oh, maybe I can help you. And I love teaching.
Yeah.
So it's great. Anyways, the situation is it's a feeding client. They came in specifically for feeding, and feeding can be a really tricky situation, especially in the clinic, because if you're only working with the client one time a week, 95% of their meals are at home or at school. So what can you do as a therapist working on feeding? So we were just talking about some different ideas for treatment sessions, but also for home programs, home ideas, home strategies. And so is that enough background?
I think that's a great background.
Okay.
So really the context of this episode is just sharing some of those tips, kind of collaborating and communicating on just some strategies for therapists to implement into sessions with their feeding clients, and strategies that we've recommended for years, things that have helped us and helped our clients. And just some of those conversations, like earlier, if we were chatting before we hit record, why is this client really stuck? And like, what are some strategies that we can do to help get them unstuck? So we're just gonna brainstorm today a little bit.
Yeah, so one of the first challenges that we talked about was that the family's not having any meals together at home. Mealtime is very unstructured, very kind of crazy, and there's another sibling involved, a little toddler sibling. So 2 young children who won't sit at the table for a meal, who snack a lot, graze a lot, walk around eating a lot. So my first tip for the family, my first idea was that they needed to find one meal every day that they could sit down together to eat. And it doesn't have to be for a long period of time. It can be for 5 minutes. If the kids will only sit at the table and sustain attention to eat a couple of bites at the table for 5 minutes, then that's where you start and you build up from there. But for a kid who is a very picky eater, which this client is, Mealtime is going to be unmotivating. It's not going to be a preferred activity. It's going to be unpreferred. They're going to avoid it. They don't want to sit at the table to eat a meal because food is not motivating to them. So we need to make mealtime a fun experience. And so figuring out which meal, usually dinner, I find is often the easiest. Maybe breakfast is easier though. Lunch is, especially with working parents, lunch is usually not an option, but breakfast or dinner, when one or both parents can be at the table with the children, and mealtime just needs to be fun. And you need to come up with a list of ideas of how you can make mealtime fun for everyone and focus on that first. Even if your child, the picky eating child, is not eating very much, or they're still only eating their 5 preferred foods, that's fine. The first step is making mealtime fun.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about that in my own house. It's difficult. We have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and it's really challenging to get everyone at the table, everyone in a good mood, happy. So I have to think about that constantly of, okay, we like to say a little prayer, and the kids like to say a little prayer before we eat. And then we always say what makes us happy, what made us happy today. And we try to have a fun conversation. And then I like to get silly too. I like to, use toothpicks and poke Trip hasn't eaten a pea in years, or blueberries, so we'll stick our blueberries and our peas on toothpicks, and we'll just do silly things like that. And I'm not forcing them to eat them. Okay, you have to take one bite. No, it's more of okay, let's lick it, let's smell it, let's explore it, let's squish it, and kind of taking that pressure of, okay, if we're going to sit at the table, you have to eat, taking that pressure off and just focusing on, like Jessica said, making it a fun experience, and everyone's together and we're talking about what makes us happy and what's a silly thing that someone did today, what made you laugh, and let's draw a picture. We have a whiteboard on our table, so sometimes we'll draw pictures and just literally anything to keep them at the table for more than 2 minutes.
Yeah, I think it's okay to bring a game to the table.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe
headbands, that's a great dinner game.
That is a great game. They do make specific games for mealtime as well, but just whatever your child's favorite game is, if they like to draw, maybe you break out some stamps or some stickers.
Yeah.
Anything that your child is going to think is fun and engaging, that's what you want to bring to the meal table.
Yeah, the meal table.
I know you make fun of me for calling it the meal table, but it's where you eat your meals.
I know. All right, tip number 2, we are going to involve the children in the meal prep process, in the grocery shopping process, in the cleanup process. Even if they're not eating the food, we want them interacting with the food. And again, we're not forcing them to eat the food. It's what's the word? Peeling the cucumbers, peeling the potatoes. It's cutting the mushrooms. It's, stirring the soup. It's squishing the food, getting our hands messy, whatever it is, getting them involved without the pressure of eating it. Even going to the grocery store and having them pick out, okay, which bushel of bananas do you want? They're well, I don't like bananas. It's that's okay. Which one should we get? And they have that control over it rather than them going to the grocery store with you and being on a device or playing in the cart. They're actively involved in helping pick out the food, and if they're old enough, reading the labels and feeling the fruit and smelling the vegetables and whatever it is. It should be a process, and then cleaning up as well. Having the kids put the stuff in the dishwasher and wash the dishes and touch the food and bring their plates to the table, setting up the meal. What is it? Setting the table for the meal.
Setting the meal table.
Setting the meal table. Exactly. So there's a lot that's included in the mealtime process that actually doesn't involve eating. That's all really beneficial for our feeding clients.
And there's a couple of things here. Often we get resistance as therapists for providing this strategy to parents. We get the resistance because it takes longer when your child is involved.
So much longer.
And it's a lot messier when your child is involved. And my comeback is always, yeah, but these are life skills, right? These are life skills that we want our kids to have so that someday they can be as independent as possible in their meal prep and meal cleanup. And they're not going to be able to do that if we don't teach them at these younger ages or older ages if we haven't started yet. So,
and let them make mistakes.
Mistakes. Laugh at the mistakes when something gets spilled, just kind of take the pressure off. And I just think about problem sizes sometimes. Like, how big of a problem is it if your child spills on the floor? Is it a little problem or is it a big problem? Let's make sure that we're, having those appropriate size reactions to the problem when it's really not a big deal.
As the caregivers, like we need, the grown-ups need to be
adults.
having the appropriate reaction size. Yeah.
Yes. So the tip that I gave this family for this one was to, involve this child in the meal planning specifically and allow the child to help pick food for the meals. So if we're looking at dinner time, and dinner time is when they have chosen for the whole family to come together and spend some time at the meal table eating together, even if it is for just 5 minutes, this child gets to participate in the preparation and the planning of it. So you can ask your child, what should we have for dinner tomorrow night? Chances are the child's, because they're a picky eater and they have a handful of safe foods, they're going to pick probably the same thing every time. And that's okay because they are having some control over the meal, over their food choices. And then maybe you pick a side dish as well. So if this child's favorite food is chicken nuggets and that's what they pick every time, then you say, okay, great, let's have chicken nuggets for dinner tonight. What should we have for a side dish? Should we have green beans or should we have cucumbers? And they get to pick. Even if those two options are non-preferred, they're still going to pick one and have some control. And they, this client specifically, his response is probably going to be, I don't like those. So my response is going to be, okay, you don't have to eat them, but which one should we have anyways? Like,
we
which
have
one?
To pick one.
Let's pick one. Don't have to eat them. Don't like them. That's fine. Which one should we have? And there's no negative connotation here. There's no shame. There's no judgment. It's just, okay, that's fine. Don't have to eat it. That's okay.
Yeah.
It's so hard.
It is. It is. Yeah. And it's such a slow process.
Yes.
This whole feeding therapy. It's a very slow, methodical plan of getting kids to interact and be open to interact with other foods. So
it's also a process of us as the adults, the parents, changing our verbiage
and our expectations,
how we respond to the child. Because if the child is like, oh, I don't like that, how do you respond?
Or if someone else says to your child, oh, you don't like that. That's my pet peeve, is when like another grown up will tell my kid what they do or don't like.
Oh my gosh. We're going to get sidetracked, but we'll come back. I remember when Logan was like 4 or 5 and he really liked Brussels sprouts, which is not something you would expect a young child to like, but we ate a lot of veggies and we cooked them and mixed them with like bacon. And so they were really yummy. And I remember buying the Brussels sprouts at the grocery store and he was with me. And the cashier scanned the Brussels sprouts and then looked at Logan and was like, oh, I bet you don't like these. And I almost lost it. I was like, actually, he loves Brussels sprouts.
Thanks for implanting that seed in his head.
So I think, as adults, when we're talking to children, that's something to remember is let's not plant these negative seeds in children's minds of what they do or don't like when we don't really know. Or even if we do know that the child doesn't like it, we don't need to state it for them.
No. Or like if we have pizza and there's olives on the pizza and the kid doesn't like the olives, it's not like we're going to pick all the olives off first and then give them the pizza.
We can let them
give them the pizza, and if they want to pick off the olives, that's fine. But they're touching it, they're interacting with it, they're looking at them. It's just, we're creating beasts sometimes when we, do everything for the kids. So
this is true. This is one of our things as therapists that we have to remind parents sometimes, I think, is that our children are so capable of so many things if we just let them do it.
And let them make mistakes when they do it.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, we're getting off on a tangent.
I know.
All right. The next one that I recommended for a home was to decrease grazing during the day. So when we have a picky eater, oftentimes we get into the habit of allowing them to eat whenever and however they want. And for some children, that is necessary based on where they are developmentally, based on where they are in their picky eating stage.
Safety-wise.
If the child is not consuming enough calories, then we want to make sure that they are. But if we're not concerned about the amount of calories the child is actually eating, we want to try to make sure we're not allowing them to graze throughout the day, because then they'll never want to come to the meal table and they're never going to experience what it feels like to be hungry, which we always think about feeling hungry as a negative thing.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily a negative thing in today's day and age. We have plenty of food right now in where we, in America, I guess.
Yeah.
In a lot of other countries too. But if the child's not underweight, if we're not concerned about calories, let's make it a rule in the house that we're not going to graze anymore. If we want to eat a snack, if we want to eat a meal, we're going to sit at the table to do it. And we can sit together.
And having those designated times, specifically my kids will be like, we'll finish a meal and then they'll be like, I want a snack. And I'm like, we just ate a meal.
But a snack is different, right?
Or they'll wake up and they'll say, I want a snack. It's like, no, it's breakfast time. And they'll want like a snack.
But a snack is like fruit snacks and bars.
Like a bar,
right?
Yeah. Or like a cheese stick,
so it's different.
It's different. And so setting those times and almost using a visual schedule as well, it can be really helpful. I'm literally about to do this in my own house.
I think you should.
Okay, it's morning time. We have breakfast. Okay, then at 10 a.m. it's snack time. And then 12, it's lunchtime. And they can see when it's time to eat, because otherwise, specifically Austin, she will want to eat constantly. And it's exhausting as a parent. You're just you feel like you're in the kitchen all day long feeding your kids. And it's just not a fun thing to do. So
it's also not functional.
No! She's at school one day a week. She's not eating the entire time. They have one snack.
But she's busy.
She's busy.
Her peers.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's different.
It is. Yes. So I don't even know where I was going with that regard. Just I'm empathizing with you because I get it. It's hard. And I'm in the thick of that with you as well. And we're all just trying to do the best that we can. But we are really trying to implement that breakfast time, okay, then it's snack time, and then it's lunchtime, and feeling full as well, and giving them the control. What do you want for a snack? Okay, great. And we'll also say the kitchen's closed at night too, because if we don't finish our dinner, and I don't force them to eat their meals, because I think growing up I have a lot of childhood trauma from that.
I had the same thing. I had to finish everything on my plate.
Yes, and I think it's still like an issue personally. That's a whole nother thought. But anyways, I don't force them to eat their meal. They can say, I want to save it for later, and then we'll save it for later. And when they're saying, I want a snack, 2 minutes later, it's like, okay, well, let's have a few more bites of our dinner, and then we can have a snack when it's snack time. And okay, the kitchen's closing. Would you like to finish your dinner before the kitchen closes? Oh, yes. Because otherwise they'll just stay up till midnight eating, So that's been a helpful tip for us too, is saying, okay, the kitchen's closing.
Yeah, there has been several times where Logan didn't eat very much at dinner.
Just several times. Just a
handful of times where, I'm just thinking in the recent past, right? Yeah. He's 11, so it's a different phase. But, I don't serve up these like gigantic dinners. It's like kind of just a medium-sized portion. And I always ask him, hey, how hungry are you? A little bit, medium, or a lot? And that's kind of how I base how much food we get. And a lot of times he's serving himself, and he's never been like a huge eater. But there's been plenty of times where he'll eat kind of a smaller dinner. And then right before bed, Mom, I'm hungry. And I'm like, you are about to go brush your teeth for bed. You're not eating right now. Again, because even if he is feeling those feelings of hunger, I know it's not going to hurt him. He's not underweight. He's not going to starve overnight. Chances are he's going to eat a really big breakfast, which will be great to set him up for the day.
Yeah.
But I think, number one, we as parents, we don't like it when our kids are unhappy.
Correct.
It's very hard to watch our kids be unhappy. So when our child is hungry and they don't feel happy, we want to fix it. But I think we have to take a step back and remember, and I have to remind myself this all the time, it's okay if he's hungry. It's okay if he's mad. It's okay if he's sad. Like, those are all okay feelings to have, and they will pass. And I can be there for him while he's having those big feelings. But I don't have to fix those feelings by doing exactly what he wants in that moment, right? Yeah. So Wow, we just went off on another tangent.
Yeah.
I don't even remember where we started.
I don't know.
I hope nobody gets mad at us today.
I'm sure people will, but it's fine. It's our podcast.
I just imagine people getting mad. That's why I wanted to throw that out there. Like, it's okay for kids to feel hungry, but we need to take into consideration if they are underweight and they're not consuming enough calories. That's a little bit different. So, chatting with your pediatrician, if that's the case, is important.
I don't think people are going to be mad at us because we're literally doing the best that we can as parents as well.
I hope
and then we
so.
take those experiences and we put them into our clinical experiences as well. And we're all on the same team here.
Well, and the professional. Like, I mean, I've been working with feeding kids since I first started. I remember my first feeding kid that I ever worked with.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You are you love
I do.
the
Feeding is fun.
Yeah. No, not my favorite. I mean, it's okay, but
it's great.
I just don't like the throw up.
Well, I don't think I've ever had a kid throw up during a feeding. I have had kids throw up after swinging too much.
Oh, yeah. No, I don't like that.
But
either.
not during feeding.
Yeah.
So.
No.
Anyways, there was a couple of books. Oh, there was a book. It's called Food Chaining. Yeah. I know there's a new updated version, but I actually like the original version because it gives more case studies. I think they took those out of the new version, which I think is weird. Yeah. Food Chaining is a book I always recommend because it talks about why kids get stuck in feeding patterns and how you can slowly work with them to expand their food rapport based on what they already like to eat and what's already safe for them. So.
Yeah, and then just a few more ideas that you can, if you're a therapist, you can take into your session. Switching up the treatment routine, switching up the session plan, allowing the child to be like the therapist and run you through the session and give you tips and help you, the therapist. Sometimes switching, like doing that role reversal can be a really fun strategy as well.
Yeah, and for this specific client, they came in specifically for feeding, but I think it's okay, chatting with the family, make sure they are understanding what's going on. It's okay to take one session every once in a while and not do any feeding, like no sitting down and actually eating food, but more of sensory primitive reflexes. Maybe you do a food-based sensory bin with no expectations of eating or trying anything and just switching up that routine every once in a while, especially because if the client is getting stuck in this pattern of we play in the gym and then we get mom and we go eat, or we play in the gym and then we go try a new food. Oftentimes what we'll see start happening is behaviors will start to escalate because the child knows what's coming, and what's coming is non-preferred because feeding is non-preferred. So switching it up so that it's not always the same can be helpful.
Yep. And then also changing the environment. So instead of going into the kitchen and always doing that feeding activity in the kitchen, doing it in the treatment room, like the treatment gym, setting up a picnic and putting a blanket down and, gathering the items in order to have a little picnic together, and maybe inviting some other peers who are also in the clinic at the same time, see if they want to join us for the little picnic.
Yeah, those were just some different ideas that we had talked about already. Some other ones that I came up with just recently, well, not some, just another one that I came up with was if the child is struggling with that transition to the feeding activity, then teaching them some regulation strategies. They're having a meltdown, talking about why. It's like, oh, because you don't want to go do this. Okay, well, let's work through this. This is what we're going to do today. But if you need 5 minutes to take a break first, then we can do that. I'll give you your space. That can be helpful. But I think if you're starting to see those behaviors escalate, we need to understand that it's because we're in this routine of doing this non-preferred, and the child is smart. They get it. They know exactly what's going on, even if they can't communicate it with us. So we just need to switch it up.
Yeah. So hopefully that's helpful. Hopefully those ideas give you a little bit more pep in your step. Maybe they will, switch it up for you a little bit. Maybe you'll just have, some fellow therapists to empathize with, some fellow parents to empathize. Emphasis on?
Nope.
Why can't am I having brain fart? Empathize.
It's
literally my favorite piece.
Oh my goodness, what's happening?
I'm done. Turn it off. Oh my gosh. Okay. So anyways, you're going to empathize with us and it's going to be great. We're going to have a great session with our feeding kiddos and we're going to live life and eat.
I also think it's a good reminder that if you are struggling with a feeding kid or just struggling with a client because of whatever they've got going on and you feel stuck, reach out to a fellow therapist and ask for help. Ask for new ideas.
Definitely.
Brainstorming with other therapists can be one of the best ways to get new ideas and to help get out of a rut.
Yep. If you loved this episode, if you didn't love it, that's okay too. But take a minute, leave us a review on iTunes or Apple Podcasts and
or Spotify.
We're also on YouTube. So if you're listening on YouTube, leave a comment. Make sure you're liking the video, subscribing, all the things. Just let us know. Thanks. Interact with us. We need some love, you know?
Yeah. We haven't gotten any reviews lately.
I don't know. I haven't looked.
We've gotten some comments on Spotify. So now you can comment on Spotify, which is cool. But make sure you're also checking out our YouTube channel because we've got the full videos there as well.
Yeah. Okay. With that, we'll see you next week for another video.
Okay, bye.
Thank you so much for listening to All Things Sensory by Harkla.
If you want more information on anything mentioned in the show, head over to harkla.co/podcast to get the show notes.
If you have any follow-up questions, the best place to ask those is in the comments on the show notes or message us on our Instagram account, which is at Harkla_family or at All Things Sensory Podcast. If you just search Harkla, you'll find us there.
Like we mentioned before, our podcast listeners get 10% off their first order at Harkla. Whether it's for one of our digital courses or one of our sensory swings, the discount code SENSORY will get you 10% off. That's SENSORY.
Head to harkla.co/sensory to use that discount code right now.
We are so excited to work together to help create confident kids all over the world. While we make every effort to share correct information, we're still learning.
We will double check all of our facts, but realize that medicine is a constantly changing science and art.
One doctor or therapist may have a different way of doing things from another.
We are simply presenting our views and opinions on how to address common sensory challenges, health-related difficulties, and what we have found to be beneficial that will be as evidence-based as possible.
By listening to this podcast, you agree not to use this podcast as medical advice to treat any medical condition in either yourself or your child.
Consult your child's pediatrician or therapist for any medical issues that he or she may be having.
This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to the podcast.
Thanks so much for listening.